He laughed before he even finished opening the small, unevenly wrapped box, a sharp sound that cut through the soft glow of Christmas lights and echoed against the glass walls of the high-rise penthouse overlooking the frozen Chicago skyline. And in that moment, something inside her quietly folded in on itself, the way hope does when it realizes it has arrived somewhere it was never meant to survive. The tree glittered behind them, expensive and perfect, while she stood still with her hands clasped, already bracing for the familiar sting. And somewhere deep inside, the reader might feel it too, that uneasy tightening in the chest, wondering what it would be like to offer the last fragile piece of yourself to someone who had learned to see the world only in terms of power and control. What if this were you, standing there with your heart in a box someone else was about to crush without even noticing? Michael Russo had built his empire the way winter builds ice on the Great Lakes, layer by layer, cold and relentless, until nothing beneath it could breathe. In the criminal underworld, his name carried weight and fear, spoken carefully and often too late. Money obeyed him, men feared him, enemies disappeared quietly. But Christmas meant nothing to him beyond another date on the calendar, another reminder that the world expected softness from a man who had survived by erasing it. So when Hannah Moore, the woman he barely noticed until she started quietly changing the air around him, handed him that small box with trembling fingers, he laughed because it felt safer than feeling anything else. Hannah had grown up in a tired Ohio town where churches outnumbered grocery stores and kindness was often the only currency left. Life had taken more from her than it had ever given, starting with her parents in a single icy accident and continuing through years of jobs that paid just enough to keep the lights on but never enough to build a future. When she crossed paths with Michael, it was through a charity event he funded for appearances only, the kind where cameras mattered more than people. She worked there quietly, never asking for attention, never expecting him to notice her soft-spoken faith or the way she stayed late to clean up after everyone else left. But he did notice, eventually, not because she tried, but because she never did. The gift she handed him cost almost nothing in dollars, but it had cost her weeks of quiet sacrifice. Inside the box was a small, worn leather Bible, its edges softened by age, with a simple inscription written in careful ink on the inside cover. It had belonged to her father, the only thing pulled from the wreckage that night so many years ago. She had wrapped it with hands that shook not from fear of Michael, but from fear of hope. Because sometimes hope is more dangerous than despair, and she knew that once you offer it, you can never take it back. Michael's laughter faded when he saw what it was, the sound dying in his throat as confusion replaced amusement. His hands slowed, then stopped entirely, fingers resting on the cracked leather as if it might burn him. The room felt suddenly smaller, the city beyond the windows unreal and distant. He had not touched a Bible since he was a boy in a cramped Brooklyn apartment, kneeling beside a mother who whispered prayers through bruised lips while his father shouted at a world that had already broken him. That part of his life had been buried under years of violence and ambition, sealed away so completely that he had almost convinced himself it never existed. His hands began to shake, barely at first, then enough that he had to lower the book onto the table. It was an involuntary betrayal, his body remembering something his mind had spent decades trying to forget. Hannah saw it immediately, the subtle crack in the armor, and her chest ached not with triumph, but with compassion. She understood broken men because she had learned how to live among ruins without becoming one. She did not reach for him. She did not speak. She simply stayed, offering presence instead of pressure, the way faith often does when it is real. That night, after she left, Michael sat alone with the lights dimmed, the Bible open on his lap without him remembering when he had opened it. Pages fluttered softly in the warm air from the vents, stopping at random, as if guided by something gentler than chance. He told himself it meant nothing. He told himself it was just nostalgia, just an old wound reopening. But the shaking returned, deeper this time, carrying with it memories of prayers whispered into darkness, of a boy who once believed that goodness might still exist even for people like him. Over the weeks that followed, something subtle but irreversible began to change. Michael found himself watching Hannah differently, noticing the way she treated people who could offer her nothing in return. He started funding charities without press releases. He hesitated before giving orders that once came easily. His nights grew longer, sleep more elusive, as guilt pressed in from all sides. Power had given him everything except peace, and now peace stood just out of reach, quietly demanding a cost he was no longer sure he could afford. Hannah struggled, too, in her own way. Loving someone like Michael was not a fairy tale. It was a daily act of courage. She saw the darkness he carried, the damage he had done, and she wrestled with her own faith, asking whether redemption was truly possible for someone who had built their life on other people's pain. But she also believed in grace, not the cheap kind that ignores consequences, but the costly kind that insists no one is beyond hope. If you were in her place, would you walk away to protect yourself, or would you stay and risk being broken all over again? The turning point came quietly, without gunfire or headlines. Michael stood alone in a small church on the south side one snowy evening, sitting in the back pew, where no one recognized him. The Bible rested in his hands, steady now, the shaking gone. Tears came without warning, not from fear, but from relief, as if something heavy had finally been set down. He did not become a saint overnight. Redemption did not erase his past, but it redirected his future, one difficult, deliberate choice at a time. Months later, on another Christmas Eve, the penthouse looked different, softer, warmer. Hannah stood by the window, watching snow fall over the city, while Michael placed a small, carefully wrapped box in her hands. Inside was nothing extravagant, just a simple silver cross and a letter written in uneven handwriting, confessing regret, gratitude, and a promise to keep choosing better, even when it hurt. It was not perfection she saw in his eyes, but sincerity, and sometimes that is enough to change everything. Before the story ends, take a moment and tell us in the comments what part of this journey touched you the most, or reminded you of your own life. And if this story stirred something in your heart, gently reminded you of kindness, regret, hope, or the power of second chances, please like, comment, share, and subscribe, only if it truly meant something to you.